Let's talk DC's 5G. I've given statements on this on other shows, specifically on Thinking Critical, and it dawned on me I haven't done any kind of. I give the good stuff to Wes, and I don't do it for my own channel. I should do that for folks who aren't listening over there. So, um, everybody, either go over that channel right now or stick around, and we'll talk about 5G real quick. Hey everybody, this is Perch. I'm talking about 5G, which I've done a few times now, and it's one of those things that, for whatever reason, it's got people confused. And part of it is some big YouTube channels kind of misrepresented what it is. There was some outrage about, hey, all the DC characters being replaced by diverse characters, and that's terrible. And then also some of the reporting, most notably from Bleeding Cool, kind of leaned into all that, putting out some obviously fake rumors and then some stuff that's more accurate, and then it kind of is stirring the pot a little bit. Keep in mind, folks, that when news sites, NEWZ sites, news sites, when they put out stories, their goal is to get clicks. Their goal is to get you to click on the site and get advertisement dollars, and especially at a small level. If it's a very big organization, if it's a Fox or a CNN or an MSNBC or Washington Post or New York Times, they're still obviously out to make money, but their model is a little bit different. They've got a lot of people coming in the door. So even if sometimes they may use clickbait type headlines, CNN is kind of notorious for doing that. Their goal is not to necessarily capture people with super controversy, even if it feels like that sometimes. Their goal is to actually get people to come regularly to the site and have a regular investor. So a news site is trying to capture you for the second. They're putting up typically something extremely misleading. The story is written from a standpoint to get you mad to where you want to post something on a comment board. Put it this way: look at the news site you're looking at. Does it have a message board? Does it have more than 2 ads on the page? Are some of those ads starting to pop up and be on top of the text you're trying to read? If the answer is yes to those, then you are on a site that's primary purpose is to generate quick dollars from you any way they can get it, and the actual content of the article is secondary. So why that segue? Because 5G as an initiative from DC is something that's largely been misunderstood. So to kind of get a feel of where 5G is going, take a look at where we're currently at. We've done this Year of the Villain storyline, and it's been a year plus of kind of trade dress and theme of the villains are in control and they're taking over, and we're going to really push up villainy, which is a smart thing to do. I think that this is something that publishers I've talked about on videos before don't do enough of. They kind of make the villains secondary to a bunch of kind of nonsensical dialogue, or they make the villains kind of silly, and then nothing really happens properly there. So that is the Year of the Villain's been the past effort they've done, and so we're moving into the next one. And the bridge between Year of the Villain and the next one, and the next one is 5G, is this kind of whatever it is, misnamed big crisis event that we've heard is coming from Scott Snyder. Probably reunites him with Greg Capullo. We've heard it as dark metal. We've heard it as metal 2. We've a lot of different. It's thematically going to be those creators doing their thing, and that's what we're getting out of that story. So what does all this mean for 5G? It means that 5G is another initiative. It's another storyline that they're going to run. And the best way to think about that, if you're a long-term comic reader, is Age of Apocalypse, where you had some of the titles were halted, were stopped. There was brand new #1 issues. Everybody loves those. And it introduced alt versions of characters. In this case, it's not necessarily alt versions of characters. It's the next generation of heroes. Is this the new DC, definitively how DC is going to go? Well, that depends on how well it sells. If it sells particularly well, then absolutely this future is going to be canonized. It's going to be something people are going to lean into. But as we've seen in recent history, I mean, Legion of Superheroes, we've taken Lightning Lad and we've changed him from white to black. And so the the future and the characters within it can be changed on a whim whenever people feel like it, and they are. I think that's the thing to kind of keep in mind is none of this stuff is set in stone. It's all kind of dependent on what catches with readers. And if it doesn't catch with readers, then it's certainly not going to be continued going forward. So 5G it's a storyline, it's an event. They're not ending Superman forever. They're not ending Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, any of these things. And some of these titles won't be interrupted at all. Some of these titles will continue just as they are. If you've got Grant Morrison doing a big Green Lantern run, you're not going to interrupt that to say, hey, now we've got a whatever it is, new Green Lantern Next Generation. He's going to continue to tell the story he's going to tell. But there is going to be, like You're the Villain, which some titles will lean heavily into, and those will be the ones forefront of 5G, and some will not. And it will, basically test out to DC's readers, are people going to catch and adopt and go for these new characters? Don't know. Um, a lot of people are speculating, oh, this is going to be garbage. You never know. Is this going to be the next Miles Morales, or is it going to be the next, America Chavez? Miles Morales seemed to have some sticking power, and people responded, and they did a movie, and it made money. And Miles Morales is a character that DC's invested in and will continue to invest in. America Chavez had her solo comic book that didn't particularly sell very well. They put her on some teams that didn't necessarily move the needle for those teams as well. And now she's somewhat on the back burner. Will they do something else with the character at some point? Probably. But are they going to interrupt? Like, are they going to cancel Captain America and replace him with America Chavez? They're not going to do that. They had their effort to try and see if this character stuck, and they didn't. And that's how 5G is going to work. They're going to roll out this storyline. It's going to be peek at the future of the DC universe, of what happens when the next generation steps up. From an editorial standpoint, that's what they believe is a good thing to do. That it's going to be an attempt to see what happens when the superheroes we all know have to take a step backward, and the next generation has to step up and save the universe. Is this going to connect with this big younger generation of fans and market that they desperately want to grab? Will the older fans, the existing fans, stick around for that ride, or will they be insulted? We don't know the answer to that. It will depend on the quality of the story and the creators who are on it. I put it this way: if we get new Luke Fox Batman, and Jim Lee draws it, and I don't know, James Tyrion the Fourth writes it, and it's really tightly done, introduces some new things, very tight, great storytelling, then yeah, people are going to respond. That's going to sell great. If it's kind of unknown creative team comes on and it's kind of like Convergence was, then it won't sell great. And in 6 months or less, the storyline will conclude and Batman will be back to being Bruce Wayne, and the Luke Fox Batman will be kind of sitting there as a possible future. And maybe they'll get to it, maybe they won't. Maybe some writers in the future will refer to it and try and pick it up and do something with it. Or maybe it'll be quietly forgotten and we'll move on to Damian Wayne being the next Batman, or Stephanie Brown, or who knows who. It just, this is going to be sales and interest driven of an effort. And that's what people should remember with 5G. The other thing about it is the origins of this. They're not super secret, progressive, let's screw with the conservatives by introducing all these crazy diverse characters going nuts. That's not the driving force behind this. The driving force behind this is an attempt to get sales from a younger market that they're not catching right now. Right now, a problem in the comic industry, as it's described, is that it's aging out. That the people who are collecting comics are getting older, and they're catering to those people. But in doing so, they're not bringing in new fans. They're not bringing in new readers. That market is going underserved. That's the premise, and that's a concern. I think there's some flaws in that premise, some big ones. But all the same, that's why they're doing what they're doing. They're not doing this to own the Republicans, to own the Trump supporters. They're doing it because they're trying to make money from a different place. Now, the interesting part of all this is there's been a lot of history to suggest this won't work. So the question is, why do they keep trying the same approach anyway? And my argument would be: is there a disconnect between an editorial mandate and actually how it rolls out? So think about it like this. Um, the idea of introducing the future of heroes and kind of doing something shocking and surprising by disrupting the current status quo with something new and different. In the past, that has typically has led to sales, and it works, and it's interesting. So from an editorial standpoint, saying, hey, we're going to break things up by offering a glimpse at the future, like Days of Future Past, and like many storylines have done in the past, people have tended to eat that up, especially collectors. And the argument would go, in the process, we're going to use this as a testing ground to see which of these heroes can really go, and where we can make these changes in their core books, and how it all fits. And that all makes sense too. But then you hand this mandate, this editorial concept, down to a bunch of freelancers or people who are not necessarily invested in the longer term success of the company. And that mandate's going to be interpreted and adapted in different ways. And I think that's the interesting problem that we've got at DC and at Marvel and other places, is some of these ideas are solid, good ideas, but they're being executed on by people who, may or may not have a vested interest in the actual company and its future. So, what does all this mean for 5G? It just means that the how tightly editorial keeps their thumb on things to make sure the initial vision of trying something new, offering some big teases, is the centerpiece, and not, hey, look, we've got a black Batman now. That second thing doesn't sell well. That whole concept just gets people all riled up on any side of the political divide, and it sucks for the story. I mean, again, let's say we've got a really great artist and a really great creative writer on a new Batman featuring Luke Fox, and they tell a pretty interesting, new, inventive story through Batman. That's pretty cool. Now, let's say that the DC marketing department decides to market it with only one message: look, Batman is black now. That I mean, what a crappy thing to do, because you're undercutting what's a pretty amazing story, artist, creative team, everything else. You're basically taking all of the hard work that the creative team does, and you're boiling it down to a cosmetic change for the sake of a controversial article on one of these news sites that's just trying to get cheap clicks. That's self-destructive. And it's always surprising to me when the publishers actually do this, when they fall for it and they do take that approach. And it's happened more than once. It's happened many times. So that's the challenge I think we have in front of us. That bluntly is what we're up to. So anyway, that's a little bit on 5G. I think the key message here is: don't freak out if you're a long-term DC fan. No, your characters aren't being destroyed forever. No, they're not going to be replaced by cheap, quote unquote diversity hires. It's just a storyline. It's a glimpse at a future that may or may not come to ever pass. And if history is any indication, probably won't come to pass, because far more of these efforts have been, shuttered than gone forward with over time. Even Age of Apocalypse, that was super, super popular, had very little kind of after effects. These characters didn't get replaced. We got Blink, we got a couple of members of Age of Apocalypse. Sugar Man, I remember, came over. A couple characters kind of came over as part of X-Man, came over, and none of it did terribly well. None of it lasted long. And today, kind of the last gasp of that was this Age of X-Man storyline they just did in X-Men that was panned badly. So it's not like, the history tells us that these kinds of efforts typically revert right back to the classic characters as everybody knows them. But maybe it'll be different this time. I hope it is different this time, because if it is, it means that some pretty amazing stories came out of it and people caught on, and it was a success. That would be good news for shops, for readers, for everybody. So I'm hoping for positivity, at least in where this all goes. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on 5G. Are you worried? Are you excited? Are you just cautiously optimistic? Are you like me, where you're like, I'll read the story, and if I like it, great. And if I don't, I won't. Probably the safest, smartest thing to do. Let me know in your comments below. Like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch. Thanks for listening.
So we've had a lot of talking in this comic. What do you think of comics that talk a lot?
They're not good.
Not good. You are not a Brian Michael Bendis fan. That's what I'm getting here right here.